I was standing in line at the FedEx counter inside Terminal C at Newark Liberty, holding a manila envelope full of estate documents I'd promised my lawyer I'd overnight before boarding, when a TSA supervisor walked up to me, badge clipped to his belt, and said in a voice low enough that only I could hear it, "Sir, I need you to come with me right now. Don't react. Don't look back at your family. Just nod and follow me." I almost laughed. I thought it was a mix-up, some random screening they pull on guys my age with too many bags. Then he leaned in another inch and said, "Mr. Calloway, your life is in danger. Please, we have about 90 seconds before they notice." That's when my stomach dropped through the floor. If you're watching this, take a second and tell me where you are right now and what time it is on your end. Type it in the comments, because I want you to remember this moment the way I remember mine, standing under the fluorescent lights at Gate C-92 at 6:45 on a Tuesday morning, about to fly to Charleston with my son and his wife for what was supposed to be a long-overdue family weekend. I thought I was finally doing what my late wife had asked me to do on the last good day she had. I had no idea I was walking straight into something she'd warned me about for nearly 4 years. My name is Walter Calloway. I'm 63 years old, and until about 11 months ago, I thought I was a pretty good judge of character. I built a regional logistics company out of a single warehouse in Trenton back in 1989, grew it to 17 distribution hubs across the mid-Atlantic, and sold off 2 of the divisions in 2019 for a number that, frankly, I still feel uncomfortable saying out loud. The point is, I spent 3.5 decades reading people across negotiating tables, truckers, Teamsters union reps, Walmart procurement officers, IRS auditors. I was good at it. And I still missed what was happening right under my own roof. My wife, Eleanor, passed away on a Sunday in late November, the day after Thanksgiving. Pancreatic cancer. From diagnosis to her last breath was 9 weeks. 9 weeks. We'd been married for 38 years. She was the kind of woman who remembered the names of the kids who bagged our groceries, who sent handwritten birthday cards to people she'd worked with 20 years ago, who could look at someone for 10 seconds and tell you exactly what they were after. She used to say I had book smarts and she had eye smarts, and between the two of us, we made one fully functional adult. The last real conversation we had, she was propped up on the couch in our family room in Princeton, wrapped in the Afghan her mother had crocheted for our wedding. She held my hand and she said, "Walt, when I'm gone, you're going to want to give Daniel everything. Don't. He's not ready. And that woman he married is not who she pretends to be. Promise me you'll watch. Just watch, before you give." I told her I'd watch. I meant it when I said it, but grief does strange things to a man. It makes you want to fix the holes in your life as fast as possible, and the easiest hole to try to fix was the one between me and my only son. Daniel was 34 when his mother died. He'd been an only child, and we'd spoiled him in the gentle way you spoil a kid who's the only one. Private school. A year abroad in Spain, an undergrad at Lehigh, an MBA at Fordham that I paid for in full. He'd bounced through 3 jobs in the last 6 years, none of them sticking, all of them ending with him telling me his boss didn't appreciate him. He'd married Brielle 4 years before Eleanor got sick. She was 31 now. Gorgeous in that careful, expensive way, and she had a way of laughing at all of my jokes that I'd always found slightly off, like she'd rehearsed the rhythm of it. Eleanor had hated her on sight. Not in a loud way. Eleanor was never loud. But the first night, Daniel brought her home for dinner. After they left, Eleanor washed the dishes in complete silence and finally said, she asked me what year the kitchen was renovated and how much we paid for the lake house. Walt, who does that on a first meeting? I'd brushed it off. I'd brushed off everything, the credit cards Daniel had quietly run up that I paid off twice. The luxury SUV Brielle was driving despite Daniel telling me he was between opportunities. The trip to St. Bart's they took the spring before Eleanor's diagnosis, the one Daniel had said was a small thing, just a few days. It wasn't small. I saw the receipt by accident. It was $31,000. Eleanor noticed all of it. I was the one who didn't want to see. So when Daniel called me about 6 months after the funeral and said, "Dad, Brielle and I were thinking, you should come to Charleston with us in October. There's a place down on Kiawah Island. My buddy from grad school owns it. You and Mom always said you wanted to do that low country drive. Let's just do it. Just the three of us. No business, no phones." I said yes before he finished the sentence. I wanted it to be true so badly I didn't even pause. The morning of the flight, Daniel picked me up in his Range Rover at 45. Brielle was already in the passenger seat, wrapped in a cream-colored cashmere wrap, sipping a Starbucks cold brew. She turned around and said, "Walter, you look tired. Did you sleep okay? I packed melatonin if you need it." She held up a little brown bottle and shook it like a bell. I told her I was fine. I climbed into the back seat. Daniel tossed my carry-on into the trunk. We drove the 45 minutes to Newark in the dark. And the whole way Brielle kept up this gentle stream of conversation about restaurants in Charleston she'd researched, a horse-drawn carriage tour she'd booked, a pharmacy she'd already located near the rental in case you need anything for your blood pressure, Walter, since you mentioned at Christmas. I hadn't mentioned my blood pressure at Christmas. I don't have blood pressure issues. But I let it go. We checked our bags. We went through pre-check. Daniel was making jokes about TSA agents. Brielle laughed at all of them, that practice laugh. We had about an hour before boarding, and Daniel suggested we go get breakfast at the little brasserie near gate C90. I told him I needed to drop the FedEx envelope first, and I'd meet them in 15 minutes. He hesitated for a half-second, then said, "I'll come with you. Brielle, grab us a table." She kissed his cheek and said, "Don't take too long, baby. I'll order you the egg white thing." That hesitation, that's what I keep coming back to. He didn't want me alone, even for 15 minutes. I told Daniel I was fine, that I'd be quick, that he should go keep her company. He pretended to be okay with it. I walked off toward the FedEx counter at the far end of the terminal, and that's when the man in the Navy uniform stepped into my path. I want to be clear about something. He didn't grab me. He didn't make a scene. He just walked beside me, matching my pace, and said quietly, "Mr. Molly, Callaway, my name is Agent Reyes. I'm with TSA's Federal Air Marshal Coordination Office. I need you to walk with me to a secure office, and I need your son and daughter-in-law to believe you are being detained for a documents review. Can you do that for me?" I didn't say anything. I just nodded. He led me through an unmarked door beside the FedEx counter, down a hallway with cinder block walls painted hospital green, and into a small windowless room with 2 chairs and a wall-mounted screen. There was already a woman in the room, mid-40s, in a charcoal suit. She introduced herself as Special Agent Karen Holcomb, FBI, Newark Field Office. She told me to sit down. She asked if I wanted water. I told her I wanted to know what the hell was going on. She turned the monitor on. It was footage from the curbside drop-off where Daniel had unloaded the bags from his SUV. The angle was from a streetlight camera. I watched my son walk to the back of the vehicle, lift my carry-on out, and set it on the curb. Then I watched Brielle step out of the passenger side, walk around and unzip the front pouch of my bag. She slipped something inside, something small. I couldn't see what. She zipped it up, smoothed the front, and walked into the terminal. Agent Holcomb said, "Mr. Motto, Callaway, that bag is currently in our custody. We pulled it off the conveyor before it was loaded onto your aircraft. I need you to look at this next image." The screen changed. It was a close-up photograph of a small glass vial, the kind you might see in a chemistry lab, no bigger than a tube of lipstick. Beside it was a thin plastic strip with what looked like adhesive on one side. "This was inside the lining of your carry-on," she said. The vial contains liquid fentanyl. The strip is a transdermal delivery patch, modified. Our lab is still confirming, but the working theory is that this was meant to be applied to a surface you would routinely come into contact with. A toiletry kit. A reading glasses case. Something personal. Even brief skin contact with the dose in that vial would induce respiratory failure within 20 to 40 minutes. By the time anyone realized you were in distress, you'd be in the back of the car on Kiawah Island, 2 hours from a hospital. I sat there. I didn't say anything for what felt like a long time. Then I said, "Are you sure it was her? It couldn't have been a baggage handler? Somebody at the curb?" Holcomb didn't blink. She rewound the footage. She slowed it down. She zoomed in. You could see Braille's hand go into her coat pocket, come out with something cupped in her palm, and slide it directly into the front pouch of my bag. The motion was practiced. Smooth. She'd done it before, at least in rehearsal. I said, "Why would she?" "We're going on vacation," Holcomb said. "Mr. Rayon. Calloway, we've been monitoring your son and daughter-in-law for nearly 2 months. We didn't approach you because we didn't have direct evidence of intent until 40 minutes ago. Your son is in significant debt to a private lending operation out of Atlantic City, roughly $1.1 million, accruing at terms that are, let's say, not standard. He's missed 3 deadlines. The last one was Friday. We've intercepted communications between your daughter-in-law and an associate of that lender, suggesting that an insurance policy on your life, along with assets transferred into your son's name through your estate, would resolve the debt. The trip to South Carolina was the timeline. She let that sit. I asked her how long they had to do this. She said, based on the messages, the deadline they'd been given was 48 hours from this morning. I asked her why TSA had been the one to flag it. She said the FBI had asked TSA to monitor the curb camera starting that morning, because they'd flagged Brielle's flight check-in pattern overnight. They'd been waiting to see if she'd make a move at the airport. She had. Within 40 seconds of the SUV door opening, I asked Holcomb what my options were. She said, "We can arrest both of them right here, right now. With what we have, your son will face a conspiracy charge. Your daughter-in-law will face attempted murder. But, Mr. Calloway, I have to be honest with you. Their attorneys will argue that the vial could have been planted by anyone with access to that bag. Without intent caught on a clearer recording, without a confession, your daughter-in-law walks. Maybe both of them walk. The footage shows her placing something. It does not show what. I asked what the alternative was. She said, "We'd like you to get on the plane. We'll have agents on board and a team waiting in Charleston. We'll let them think the plan is in motion. We'll give them rope, and when they make the next move, we'll have everything we need." I thought about Eleanor. I thought about her and that Afghan, telling me to watch. I told Holcomb I'd do it. She had me sign a consent form. She gave me a small device that looked like a money clip, told me to keep it in my breast pocket, told me to press the side of it twice if I needed an emergency response. They returned my carry-on with the vial removed and the lining repaired so well I couldn't tell anyone had touched it. I walked back into the terminal at 7:22. Daniel was waiting at the gate, looking at his phone. Brielle was beside him. They both looked up when they saw me coming. Brielle said, "Honey, what was all that? You were gone forever." I said, "Some kind of paperwork issue with the FedEx label. They thought I was sending something restricted, took forever to clear up." Daniel said, "Jesus, Dad, I was about to come find you." I said, "I'm fine, let's go. We're boarding." The flight to Charleston is about an hour and 40 minutes. It was the longest hour and 40 minutes of my life. Brielle ordered a Bloody Mary and made a show of toasting to family. Daniel kept asking me if I was warm enough, if I wanted his blanket, if I'd taken my morning vitamins. He'd never once in his 34 years asked me about my morning vitamins. I almost asked him point blank what was wrong with him. I didn't. I just said I was fine, and I closed my eyes and pretended to doze. About 40 minutes into the flight, Brielle leaned across Daniel and said, "Walter, I've been meaning to ask. With everything that's happened this past year, have you given any thought to simplifying things? Estate-wise, I mean. Eleanor's passing must have made the legal stuff so complicated. My uncle is an estate attorney. He's been telling me how much smoother it is when assets are co-titled with adult children early. Just something to think about." I opened my eyes and I looked at her. Really looked at her. The careful makeup, the tiny diamond studs Daniel had given her for their 2nd anniversary, paid for on a card I later cleared. The practiced softness in her voice. I said, "That's thoughtful, Brielle. Let's talk about it down in Charleston when we're all relaxed." She smiled. She actually smiled bigger. She said, "Of course. There's no rush." There was every rush. I just played along. We landed at 9:12. The rental was a black Suburban. Daniel had reserved. He drove. Brielle sat in front. I sat in the back, watching the live oaks and the Spanish moss roll by along Maybank Highway, watching the marshes open up as we crossed the bridges. And I kept thinking about how Eleanor would have loved this drive, and how my son was driving me toward what he believed would be the last 48 hours of my life. The rental house on Kiawah was a 4-bedroom on the ocean side. Gray cedar shake, screened porch off the kitchen. The kind of place Eleanor and I had talked about renting for our 40th anniversary. We never made it to 40. We got there around 10:30. Brielle made a big production of unpacking. She offered to make me a sandwich. Daniel suggested we walk down to the beach. I said I needed to lie down for a couple of hours, that the early flight had wiped me out. The truth was, I wanted to be alone with my phone. I locked the bedroom door, sat on the edge of the bed, and told Holcomb on the secure number she'd given me. She picked up on the 2nd ring. She told me her team was already in place. 2 agents were posing as a couple in the rental 3 doors down. Local FBI was coordinating with the Charleston field office. She told me to act tired, act distracted, let them set the pace. I asked her if she thought they'd try something today. She said, "Mr. Calloway, with their timeline, they don't have the luxury of waiting." She was right. That afternoon, around 4, Daniel knocked on my door and suggested we drive over to Bowen's Island for a sunset oyster roast. Just a casual thing. He said the rental host had recommended it. Brielle was already in the front seat when I came out. She had a thermos in her lap. She said she'd made me iced tea, the way Eleanor used to, with the lemon and the mint. I had never told her how Eleanor made iced tea. Eleanor barely drank iced tea. I held the thermos. I didn't drink from it. I said, "I'll save it for the drive home, sweetheart. I'm a little overheated already." Brielle's smile flickered. "Just a hair." She said, "Of course. Bowen's Island is exactly what you'd hope it is. A weathered shack on stilts over the marsh, oysters by the bushel, paper towels on the tables, sunset turning the water gold." We sat at a picnic table. Daniel ordered a beer. Brielle ordered a glass of wine. I ordered sweet tea. Brielle insisted on getting up to pay for the round, even though I told them this trip was on me. When she came back with the drinks, she set mine down and slid it across the table to me. I watched her do it. I watched the way her thumb stayed on the rim a half-second too long. I made a show of patting my pockets, then said, "Dang. I left my reading glasses in the car. Daniel, can I borrow your keys? I want to look at the menu. My eyes are shut." He handed me the keys. I walked out to the parking lot. I didn't go to the car. I walked behind the building, poured the sweet tea into the marsh grass, and walked back. I came back in holding the empty cup like I'd already drunk half of it. I sat down. I looked across the table at my son. He was watching me. I'd never seen that expression on his face before. He looked, for a second, almost relieved. like a man watching something inevitable finally happen. I asked him about his work. I asked him about his old college roommate. I told him a story about his mother, about the time she got pulled over for going 7 miles an hour over the limit on the Garden State Parkway and talked the trooper into giving her directions to a diner instead of a ticket. He laughed. He actually laughed, and I saw the boy he'd been when he was 12, before any of this. And my heart broke right there at that picnic table. About 15 minutes later, I said I was feeling lightheaded. I wasn't, but I needed to give them the show. I let my eyes go a little glassy. I let my words slow down. Brielle was instantly attentive. "Walter, are you okay?" "Daniel, look at him. He's pale. We should get him back to the house." "Walter, can you walk?" Daniel was already standing. His hand was on my elbow. He said, "Dad, lean on me. Let's get you to the car. You probably just need to lie down." I let him walk me out. I let him buckle me into the back seat. Brielle drove, fast, back across the bridges, back toward Kiawah. Daniel sat in the back with me, his hand on my shoulder. He said, "Just rest, Dad. We're almost home. We're going to take care of you. We're going to take care of you." I'll never forget the way he said it. When we pulled into the driveway of the rental, 2 cars I hadn't seen that morning were parked along the side of the road. As Daniel was helping me out of the back seat, 4 agents came out of the neighbor's house. 2 more came around from behind the rental, and Karen Holcomb walked up the driveway with her badge already out. Brielle saw them first. She froze with her hand on the front door. Daniel turned, still holding my elbow, and the look on his face went from concern to confusion to something I'd never seen on him before. Pure, naked fear. Holcomb said, "Daniel Calloway." "Brielle Calloway, you're both under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder by means of a controlled substance, and several federal charges I'll detail at the field office." Brielle started to cry. Real tears. I watched her face contort and I thought, this woman is good. Even now, she's good. Daniel didn't cry. He just looked at me. He said, "Dad." That was all. Just, "Dad." I pulled my elbow out of his hand. I stepped back. I said, "Your mother told me to watch. I should have started watching a long time ago." They cuffed them both on the front steps of that rental house. The neighbors came out to stare. Brielle kept saying, "This is a misunderstanding. Daniel, tell them, tell them." And Daniel said nothing. He just kept looking at me. That night, I sat alone on the screened porch of that rental and called my younger sister, Margaret. She lives in Bucks County. She picked up on the first ring, because that's the kind of sister she is. I told her everything. I cried for the first time since Eleanor's funeral. Margaret cried with me. She said she'd be on the road in an hour, and she was. The agents stayed until almost midnight, going through the rental, taking statements. Holcomb told me that in the car ride from Bowen's Island, while I was pretending to be sedated, Brielle had texted someone, "It's done. Body in 2 hours." They had it on the wire. That message alone, combined with everything else, was enough. There would be no walking away. Not for either of them. 3 days later, I sat across from Daniel in a federal holding facility in North Charleston. He'd asked to see me. His attorney, a guy I was paying for because I couldn't quite stop myself, had told him not to talk. He talked anyway. He told me Brielle had brought it up first, 6 months after his mother died. He told me she'd presented it as a hypothetical. He told me he'd pushed back, and then the loan came due, and the men holding the note had shown up at their condo in Hoboken in the middle of the night, and Brielle had pulled out the hypothetical again, and this time it hadn't sounded like a hypothetical. He told me he'd told himself over and over that he wasn't really going to do it, that he was just going along with the planning to keep her calm, that he would have stopped it, that when the moment came, he would have stopped it. I asked him why he'd looked relieved at the table at Bowen's Island when he thought I'd drunk the tea. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, "Because I thought it was finally over. Not your life, Dad. The waiting." I left the facility. I sat in my rental car in the parking lot for 45 minutes. I didn't cry. I'd cried myself out 3 nights earlier on that porch. What I did in that parking lot was call my estate attorney in Princeton. I told him I needed to revise the will. Effective immediately. Everything that had been going to Daniel was now going into a trust for any biological grandchildren I might have, with a clause that the funds could not be administered or accessed by Daniel under any circumstances. The bulk of the estate I redirected. Half of it went to a foundation in Eleanor's name to support pancreatic cancer research at Memorial Sloan Kettering. The other half went into a trust for my niece and 2 nephews, Margaret's kids, who had treated Eleanor like a second mother during the worst weeks of her life. I also wrote a letter in my own hand to be opened by Daniel on the day he was released from federal prison, whenever that day came. The sentencing came down 9 months later. Betrayal got 22 years. Daniel got 14. The judge made specific note of the fentanyl, of the targeting of an elderly relative, of the financial motive. The loan in Atlantic City was settled by federal seizure of certain assets connected to the lending operation, which is a polite way of saying the FBI took apart the people Daniel owed money to. I never saw a bill. I also never asked questions. I'm 63. I live in the same house in Princeton that Eleanor and I bought in 1991. Margaret comes up most weekends. Her kids call me Uncle Walt, and they call me on Sundays without being asked. My niece Lauren had her second baby last spring, a little boy named Eli. She asked if she could give him my middle name, Thomas. I said yes, and I cried into the phone, and she pretended she didn't hear me crying. I think about Eleanor every day. I think about her on that couch in that Afghan telling me to watch. I think about how she knew and how I didn't want to know, because knowing meant losing my son, and I'd already lost so much. But here's the thing I've learned, and the thing I want anyone watching this to hear. You don't lose people who love you. You only lose people who were never really staying. Daniel left a long time before that morning at Newark. I just hadn't admitted it to myself. If someone in your life keeps showing you who they are, and you keep deciding to see who you wish they were, that's not love. That's grief in a costume. And the longer you wear it, the more it costs you. Eleanor saved my life from her grave. A TSA agent saved my life at gate C-92. But the thing that actually saved my life was finally listening to a woman who had loved me for 38 years and who had told me in the last clear-headed conversation we ever had to watch. I'm watching now, sweetheart. I should have been watching the whole time. If this story moved you, if you've ever been the person who didn't want to see what was right in front of you, let me know in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me about the person in your life who tried to warn you. And if you're still here, still reading the signs, still trying to tell someone you love that something is wrong, don't stop. They might not listen the first time. They might not listen the 10th time. But somewhere down the line, your voice in their head might be the only thing standing between them and a curb at 6:45 in the morning, with a stranger in a Navy uniform stepping in front of them, saying the words that change everything. Stay watchful, friends, and subscribe to this channel if you want to hear the next one. There are more of these than I ever wanted to know. I've had almost a year now to sit with what happened at Newark. And the thing I keep coming back to isn't the vial in my carry-on, or the cuffs on my son's wrists, or even the look on Brielle's face when she finally understood the game was over. What I keep coming back to is the kitchen in Princeton, and Eleanor washing dishes in silence the night she met Brielle for the first time, and me brushing her off because I didn't want to do the harder work of looking. Every consequence in my life that mattered, I can trace back to a moment where someone tried to tell me something true, and I chose comfort instead. Eleanor told me Daniel wasn't ready for the kind of money I was building. I let it slide. Eleanor told me Brielle was studying our financial statements like a closing document. I let it slide. The credit card balances I quietly cleared. The trip to St. Bart's. The job that didn't last, and the next one that didn't last, and the one after that. Each of those was a small bill I paid to avoid a larger conversation. And the interest on those bills compounded, year over year, until the only payment my son could imagine was my life. That's what cause and effect looks like in a family. It isn't traumatic. It's 1,000 small choices to look the other way. And then one morning at gate C92, you find out what those choices added up to. I'm not bitter about it anymore. Bitterness is just grief that won't move. What I am is awake. I think a person owes themselves 3 things in this life, and I missed all 3 for a long time. The first is honesty. Even when honesty costs you the version of someone you wanted them to be. The second is judgment, real judgment, the kind that doesn't excuse bad behavior because the person doing it shares your last name. And the third is the strength to act on the first 2 when the moment finally comes. Because knowing the truth and refusing to do anything about it is its own kind of cowardice. Eleanor had all 3. I had book smarts and a checkbook. The difference between us almost killed me. If you're sitting somewhere right now, and there's a person in your life who keeps showing you who they are, I want you to listen to me. You already know. You don't need a TSA agent to step in front of you in an airport. You don't need a vial in your bag. The information is already inside you, and the only question is how long you're willing to pay to ignore it. Pay attention to the people who love you enough to tell you the hard thing. They are rarer than money, and they will save your life in ways you won't understand until they're gone.